magician soldiers and psychic spies in the present day, but with a backstory that assumes that Poe and Hawthorne were writing thinly veiled nonfiction, so it has this historical backstory. Second book, The Left-Hand Way, just came out last week. All the heavy world building's done, and this one goes global, so it's very James Bond. There's London, Istanbul, Tokyo, and all sorts of occult action in all these other places, and we find out more about their craft traditions and their secret services. And just to go back, because Lawrence is here, I also have a collection of short stories from Paper Golem Press, The Wizard of Makatawa and Other Stories. So, I'm going to give you the opening of The Left-Hand Way, and it's not too spoilerific, and it begins kind of with a little action. And just basically the hook of it. Prologue. The Court of the Red Death. And darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. Edgar Allan Poe. Yeah, I should one other introduction, that this concerns the fate of one of the villains who escapes at the end of book one. And so we're finding out what he's been up to. He's gone to the Ukraine. And we have some people who are looking for him. In Pripyat, the first snow of the year fell early on the deserted city and on the steel arch that hung over the sarcophagus covering the ruined Chernobyl power plant. The windless cold was appropriate for this urban tomb, but unseasonable for early autumn, and the below-freezing temperature and snow were confined to this small, desolate pocket of Ukraine. 7 Russian soldiers, 5 men and 2 women, arrived singly at the exclusion zone that enclosed the town, having entered the country in civilian dress by car, train, plane, bus, and boat. They were Spetsnaz Special Forces mages. One of them had been in Kiev for over a year. The Kremlin had kept him in place and ready for such occasions. 2 had crossed through Belarus, whose Moscow-dominated craft authority had raised no fuss. Over and under their body armor, the 7 wore the latest hiking gear, which was as well suited to their task as most uniforms. All of them claimed to be tourists visiting the ghost town, though the exclusion zone was closed for the day. The guardians of the exclusion zone were bribed to allow entry, or in one overzealous instance, temporarily subdued. The 7 weren't surprised that they had been allowed to get so close to their target. Moscow Precog had been able to see high probability paths for them that ran as far as Pripyat without interference from the Yuki Baba Yagas. Beyond that, their target stood across their timelines, and nothing was certain. Their weapons were necessarily a compromise, portability and concealment being greater priorities than for most operations, though 2 had brought rocket launchers, as bullets might not suffice. While they assembled their launchers for use, another mage waved a Geiger counter. They all wore radiation badges. The area was supposed to be safe for short stays, but it was also supposed to be free of hostile magi. And how their left-hand target might use the local low-level radiation was unclear. Was it just to provide cover, or did he actually derive some energy from it? They rendezvoused in the northwest corner of town. Pripyat's great housing block still stood ugly. For 1970s Soviet wasn't much prettier than Stalinesque. Snowmelt dripped through the now skylit ceilings. First floors bore the brown high water marks of flood damage. In the distance, the sarcophagus surrounding the plant prophesied a self-inflicted apocalypse. With a quick look over, the soldiers assessed one another with professional scrutiny and mutual respect. 7 of the best combat magi of the Russian Federation, all here for one man. They could scarcely believe the overkill, though perhaps one of them was not truly elite. Of the 2 women, the tall one, codenamed Vasilisa, was unusually thin for a craft combat soldier. She was here for a psychological reason that none of them cared to dwell on. She resembled the Americans' dead sister, Madeline. None of the Spetsnaz had doubt about their leader, a highly decorated major with the cryptonym Ogen, whose great-grandfather had died during holding the line outside of Moscow during the Great Patriotic War, after months of delaying the enemy at every turn until nature could bring winter down on their heads. Ogen had fought against Chechen shaman, Chinese border crossers, and mystic Bond wannabes from the West, and he was long overdue for a promotion. Ogen's presence alone would have sent a clear message. The Russian Craft Authority had decided that the new power in Kiev was not tolerable. Ogen held a binocular to his eye and scanned from right to left, then down the road that provided a long, clear line of sight in the direction of the melted reactor's tomb. He let out a disappointed sigh. Though it was perhaps too much to expect that their target would come out into the open to engage them, it would not have been inconsistent with his profile or previous behavior. Would Roderick hide in the operational buildings of the plant? Ogen hoped not. Though they had chosen a minimally staffed day for this operation, innocent civilians still worked at the plant, maintaining and containing the reactors, and Kraft collateral damage did not play well in the Kremlin. On to the necessary thoroughness of professional soldiering. "You'll commence the search patterns," said Ogen. He reiterated their assignments and pointed out directions. But even as he did so, his orders were moot. From the direction of the ruined plant came a false sunrise of craft power, glowing radioactive red. Ogen raised his monocular again and saw a single man moving toward them along the prospect between the ugly housing, not trying to hide or seek cover. He was as tall and straight as any czar in procession. About him, motes winked brightly in the night vision, as if isotopes were losing their half-lives on cue. A gray shroud covered his body and legs, making his movement look like hovering. A mask gave him the gaunt face of a stiffened corpse with a rictal smile. His shroud and face were spotted with blood. It was the American they called the Red Death. For the first time in mortal memory, Roderick Morton was coming forth for battle. They would not attempt capture or negotiation. Ogen signaled, and the seven moved with incredible speed, with himself and four others taking positions that would attack the American from the west and drive him toward the river, and two flanking farther out to deflect an escape run. A full circle would have looked pretty, but avoiding a circular firing squad was more important. They found cover behind the carcasses of abandoned trucks and the brush gone wild. They had spells ready, and like a sports squad, some were more magically armed for defense, others for attack. They saved their spells. They would need them. First, though, they would employ their clear advantages in number and armament. Simple physics always had its place. The cold eyes behind the Red Death's mask followed their movements and gave no sign of concern. Then, as if giving permission, Roderick nodded at Ogen. "Fire rifles," ordered Ogen. The seven shot their automatic weapons at Roderick to soften up the target and test his abilities. This man, powerful as he was known to be, had never been known for field combat in the flesh. Some of the bullets curved away from the American, some ripped through his shroud, and some seemed to pass harmlessly through his body. But some shots must have been hitting the American with real force, because the impact shook his frame, vibrating him like a drum. These hits were insufficient, for the American remained standing, always bringing himself back to attention. The explosive tips weren't exploding inside him, and the armor piercers weren't carving him up. So Ogen gave the next order, and his soldiers lobbed some hand grenades and fired the rocket grenades. Use of explosives was regarded as more dangerous in craft ops because it was hard to have a good friendly fire protection chip when a near miss would still be close enough. But Ogen preferred that risk to the risk of direct contact with this target or even physical proximity to him. Explosion after explosion shook the ground. Pieces of the pavement and clods of earth flew up and out in all directions. The smoke and dust obscured the view. Hold fire! Bits of the remaining glass in the broken windows of the buildings tinkled as they fell with the snow to the ground. The view cleared. The American was down. Ojan's lieutenant stepped forward from the left flank. Moving in on target! Some instinct gripped Ojan's heart. Hold! This gave him a moment to justify his snap judgment. First, the unseasonable snow was still falling, which indicated that the American's craft might remain hard at work. Though the American was down, he appeared to be in one piece. And like many of his Hollywood countrymen, this man was known for his theatrical treachery. Ojan knew some theatrics himself. He yelled in English, "Sister fucker!" Like a practice-range target, the American sprang to his feet, then ran, not at Ojan, but right for one of the women, impossibly fast, with a gale wind blowing before him. Ojan thought he could see rage in the Red Death's terrible mask. Thank you, ma'am. Cookies, by the way.
All right, thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you very much for having me here.
So I'm Fran Wilde, and if you weren't awake, you are now. I'm going to do a little different. I usually read on a screen, but someone sent me this very shiny early copy. Available in bookstores September 1st. Available for pre-order now. There will be a quiz, prize. Just a little quiz. Okay, so I'm going to read 2 teasers. This is the first chapter. I'm just going to read a couple pages of this. And when I read it, you will probably guess why one of the tempting titles for this book was originally Bob Gets Eaten on page 2. There is going to be a whole How a Book Gets Its Title on Chuck Wendig's blog on September 1st. Keep an eye out for it. I drew it. Densira. My mother selected her wings as early morning light reached through our balcony shutters. She moved between the shadows, calm and deliberate, while down-tower neighbors slept behind their barricades. She pushed her arms into the woven harness, turned her back to me so that I could cinch the straps tight against her shoulders. When 2 bone horns sounded low and loud from Mondarath, the tower nearest ours, she stiffened. I paused as well, trying to see through the shutter's holes. She urged me on while she trained her eyes on the sky. No time to hesitate, Carrot, she said. She meant no time to be afraid. On a morning like this, fear was a blue sky emptied of birds. It was the smell of cooking trapped in closed towers, of smoke looking for ways out. It was an ache in the back of the eyes from searching the distance, and a weight in the stomach as old as our city. Today, Ezeret Densira would fly into that empty sky, first to the east, then to the southwest. I grabbed the buckle on her left shoulder, then put the full weight of my body into securing the strap. She grunted softly in approval. Turn a little, so I can see the buckles better, I said. She took 2 steps sideways. I could see through the shutters while I worked. Across a gap of sky, Mondarath's guards braved the morning. Their wings edged with glass and locked for fighting, they leapt from the tower. One shouted and pointed. A predator moved there, nearly invisible, a shimmer among exploding gardens. Nets momentarily wrapped 2 thick, sky-colored tentacles. The sky mouse shook free and disappeared. Whales built in its wake. Mondarath was under attack. The guards dove to meet it, the sun dazzling their wings. The air roiled and sheared. Pieces of brown rope netting and red banners fell to the clouds far below. The guards drew their bows and gave chase, trying to kill what they could not see. Oh, Mondarath, Ezeret whispered, they never mind the signs. The besieged tower rose almost as tall as ours, sun-bleached white against the blue morning. Since Lith fell, Mondarath marked the city's northern edge. Beyond its tiers, sky stretched uninterrupted to the horizon. A squall broke hard against the tower, threatening a loose shutter. Then the balcony's planters toppled and the circling guards scattered. One guard, the slowest, jerked to a halt in the air and flew impossibly backwards, his leg yanked high, flipping his body as it went, until he hung upside down in the air. He flailed for his quiver, spilling arrows, as the sky opened below him, red and wet, and filled with glass teeth. The air blurred as slick, invisible limbs tore away his brown silk wings, then lowered what the monster wanted into its mouth. By the time his scream reached us, the guard had disappeared from the sky. This is a little later in the book. My main character, Kirit, and her friend Nat have experienced a bit of a setback. They didn't get something that they wanted, and they are not dealing with it well. They are going to attack the source of the denial, flying straight at it, as you do. This is chapter 8, Crosswind. "I'm coming with you," I shouted across the sky, loud against Mondarath's fading noise. Nat let me catch up with him. "We'll take the crosswind in," he replied. We were 2 lawsbreakers, flying without wing marks at Bethaliel, after all moon's time of quiet. If we were caught, we would be weighed down with even heavier markers than before. But what did that matter when we were already so burdensome to our families, to our tower? Where are we going? Nat's feet dangled at awkward, overgrown angles from his temporary wings footsling. The wings supported him, but barely. "You'll need to let me draft on your wings for the turn," he said. That was not an answer. We passed the broken tower, Lith, at the northern edge of the city. The winds here were plainer, less easy to read. They were also less prone to shifts and wind shadows. Few flew the edges of the city. I knew my mother did because the winds were also faster here. But I wondered at Nat. The crosswinds picked up farther south. To catch them on this angle, we'd need to fly a long way into the open sky. "Turning where?" I asked. I didn't care what his answer was. We were in the open, no tower to turn to, no place to land safely. My eyes burned from staring hard at the blue, looking for ripples, air currents, sky mouths, danger. We could turn back. The city meant safety. Still, I wanted to keep flying until we disappeared into the distance, until they lit our banners and set us free. "Into the center," he said, "soon." For now, all we had was sky ahead and cloud below. No towers, no colorful wings, no sky mouths, I hoped. Beyond the city, the air felt much colder. We closed on the point where a crosswind usually cut in. Ezeret had said once it was the fastest route to the center, but the most dangerous. In that moment, on that day, we didn't care. I spotted the cloud drift that marked the wind stream first and whistled to Nat. He turned his head to sight an angle off the receding towers, then whistled back. Time to turn. I took the lead, dipping my right wing low and spreading my fingers in their harnesses to stretch the upward curve of my left wing. I turned, a blade of fury carving the sky. Behind me, I heard the crack and flap of Nat's wings fighting to cut the same arc. He teetered, then pulled straight and steady. We aimed for the city. You're lucky I'm not holding my wings out and flying with it all the time. I didn't realize I was crying until my cheeks began to crackle with the cold of the crosswind. The lenses dangled around my neck, unwanted but necessary. I tucked my arm from my wing and yanked them up over my nose. My cap slipped as the strap dragged on it, but didn't fall. Those lenses. I bet Ezeret regretted wasting them now. She didn't want me by her side. Doran Gigrit didn't want me, nor Densira. None would have the Lawsbreaker, the Skymouth Attractor. None would have Nat Broken Wings either. We were nearly cast-offs. Unlucky. If we failed again, We could wind up skulking in the low tiers, scraping filth from trash to get by, unless we flew our own way. Singer Wick was behind this. The singers had taken everything, even after I'd paid my debt to my tower. The spire on the horizon caught my eye. In the fading light, the tower was pure and white, surrounded by the city's waving banners. I would run straight into its walls like a bird. The tower would shake as I fell. They would not come for me. I would go to the spire to find the truth. I'd take them by surprise. They would give me my wings, my marker, or I would challenge like Ezeret had. At first light, I would demand my rights and have my questions answered. Nat too. Nat flew behind me and back a bit. In my reflecting lens, I saw his clenched jaw, his narrowed eyes. He wanted answers too. While the city marked its shortest day, grieved its losses, and moved on, we would mark the city, carve a hole in it, break tradition. We would take what it refused to give. I shifted my gaze, refocusing at the approaching view. As the towers began to light Almoon's banners, the central rooftops blossomed with fire along their edges. Dusk advanced, the city came alight, with the spire pale and steady at its center. We aimed our wings, flying direct and angry towards the city's heart. Thank you. I have an autographing session today at 3. While I'm signing lots of things there, if you have a pre-order receipt, I will sign you a book plate if you are not at any of the destinations that I will be going to. I'm happy to sign those for you now. There are a couple of maps in with the other book plates that I have with me, so if you're partial to a map, get there early. So everybody ready for the quiz? Who gets eaten on page 2? Raise your hand if you know. Yes, Jenka. Bob, okay. Winner of the cookbook suitable for signing. If you do not have a SIFWA cookbook, these are great for getting autographs at cons, but they're also an excellent way to support the SIFWA Legal Fund. I encourage you to go find them in the bookseller's room or at the SIFWA table. There you go. Thanks. Good job, Jenka. Great listening. Does anybody have questions for Tom or for me? Come on out.
And I'll be doing a signing at the SIFWA table on Saturday at 4 o'clock. So just come on by and say hi even. That would be nice.
I don't have a time check. How are we doing on time?
I think we got about 10 minutes.
Oh, cool. This is so weird, reading with a book. You don't have a clock on it. You can't scroll. Did you see it? Because I'm used to watching the lines move, and you can make it brighter.
It's one less thing to carry, though, because you want to have the physical book with you at all times.
And if you notice, I have bubble wrap here because I'm treating it like a very special. But I almost lost it because thank you guys so much for coming. This is amazing. This is an amazing early morning crowd, and to be standing up in front of you, holding an actual book and reading to you is the most amazing feeling. So I really appreciate your support, and I know all the authors here do as well. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, and thank you again, because, I was just going to be volunteering at the SIFWA table various days, so that's awesome.
Questions for Tom? Questions for me? Yes?
Question for both of you. How long do you see your series being?
That's a good question first.
Well, it's 3 books right now, and I will bring the trilogy. Each book is self-contained, so you can get your money's worth of story from each one, and I will bring the trilogy arc to a close with book 3. If people want more, I'd be happy to do more in that, because it's a very wide world of crafts, so I could keep on going. I could go YA with it, so it's as long as people want. But so it's kind of the, there'll be the sort of Frank Baum closure of no further communications of Oz at the end, and then if readers want it, Oz is open again, so.
Updraft is the first of 3 books that I sold to Tor. Book 2 is with my editor, so there's definitely 2. There is a 3rd that I am working on currently, and from there, who knows? There are a lot of short stories that are happening as I'm drafting this, and as some of you know, Updraft started with a short story, so could be a lot more.
down the road? That was a great question. Cool. Okay. Here, take a bow with me.
Oh, yes, sir. There are cookies here if you want. Still a couple.